Hello everyone, I'm Gigafo, and today I'm going to show you 3 mage decks for your Ashes of Outland experience. This is the 4th in a series of 10 videos showing 3 decks for each class. 1 budget, 1 moderately expensive, and 1 very expensive deck. I tried to make each deck unique, fun, and competitive. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's first deck. The first deck I made for Mage is Cyclone Mage. Now this version of Cyclone Mage I've had a lot of fun with ever since the new legendary Kael'thas became available for the public. I think this deck is very fun, it's very swingy, I love it to pieces. It may not be the most budget friendly, I tried my best to keep the epics at a low with only 1 mana Cyclone, but it needs mana giants and pyroblasts to work. The main goal of this deck is to get Kael'thas out on the battlefield with cheap spells and pyroblasts in your hand to burst down the opponent in one fell swoop. If that doesn't work, however, you should have enough tempo on board with Animated Avalanche and Mana Giant to pull ahead through the game and use pyroblasts as just regular burst damage. This deck has a lot of quirks and tricks to it. It has elemental synergies with elemental allies and Animated Avalanche, and this feeds into the cheap spell mentality that is Ray of Frost, Violet Spellwing, Elemental Evocation, and Incanter's Flow, a new addition into this deck, which reduces the cost of spells in the deck by 1, which makes the Kael'thas combo a lot more manageable. Now, as I said before, this deck is very fun, but it can be a little bit hard to play because there are tons of decisions that need to be made every single turn. Like, when do I use my magic trick? Do I use my magic trick now to maybe find an out to recover from a hostile board state? Or maybe I just play Animated Avalanche as a 7/6 without the added copy. There are a lot of risky decisions that might feel bad in the short term, but ultimately lead up to the Kael'thas combo working in the end, or some other circumstance. And a great thing about this list is that it's super flexible. I added 2 copies of Living Dragon Breath for the budget version of this deck because it's a 3/4 elemental, it's a solid body. But if you have more dust or have a bigger collection, you could consider adding Evocation or Archmage Antonidas. That's a good card to put in here. This deck is very upgradable, but it doesn't need those upgrades to be successful. I think this deck can find great amounts of success, and even if it's not too successful with your collection, or it's just not in the meta at the moment, it's still a very fun deck that contributes to some of my all-time highlights in Hearthstone. The second deck I made for Mage is an All Spell Mage. Ashes of Outland brings tons of tools for this deck to work. When only a Pexis Blast was revealed, it didn't seem too promising, but Font of Power and Incanter's Flow make this archetype work. In this deck, there are several cards that have the text, "If your deck has no spells," like Font of Power, for example. Like, it has a huge drawback in you can't be running minions in your deck, which mage minions are pretty powerful on average. But if you don't have any minions, which this deck has none, you get various benefits off of cards like Font of Power or a Pexis Blast, and not necessarily an explicit benefit, but Incanter's Flow works very well with this deck, reducing the cost of almost all of the cards in it by 1. Except for the Amazing Reno, which I'll get into a bit later. The main goal of this deck is to generate tons of value out of your spells. 3 random minions for 1 mana is ridiculously good. Reducing the cost of your deck by 1, ridiculously good. A Pexis Blast is just a better Firelands portal. These synergies will help compensate for the lack of minions. This deck is trying to control the board and keep what it has on the board generated by minion generators and it's designed to keep those threats on board long enough to deal 30 damage to the enemy hero. Now, what I think will make this deck work in the end is the Amazing Reno. It's a 10 mana hero card that removes all threats from the board, no caveats, just poof, literally poof. Like, everything in this deck is leading up to the big payload, which is the Amazing Reno. And the moment you get this out, you activate an infinite value engine in his hero power. For some reason I can't get it to show up, but it's a hero power that generates random spells at the start of each of your turns, which can kind of backfire sometimes, but normally it will benefit you in some way. Despite first impressions that a lot of people had when this archetype was first revealed in Apexis Blast, I think this deck can work. I think that this deck will have a good level of success, possibly being a tier 2 deck. I don't see it being tier 1, but it's definitely shaping out to be a fun deck, and one that I will probably enjoy playing. And hopefully you do too. The last deck I made for Mage is a Highlander Mage. Now, it's sort of becoming a trend on my videos that the last deck is a Highlander deck, other than the Druid video that I had. And that's because, in my opinion, Highlander decks are going to be very good in the meta for Ashes of Outland. And that's because of Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, the League of Explorers heroes in Mage being Reno the Relicologist, and Zephyrus the Great. These cards are super good. They pretty much define Highlander as of now, and without them, Highlander wouldn't be a thing. Now, this deck's goal is to get tons of value with spells, raid the Sky Temple, and basically kill the opponent after a long control-y game, after board wipe after board wipe. This deck especially has a ton of late game powerhouses like both Reno's, Kael'thas, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, the normal Alexstrasza, and Tortolan Pilgrim. All of these cards contribute to a dominating late game. While the late game is relatively unchanged, the early game of this deck has seen quite a few changes, and quite a few new additions in Evocation, Imprisoned Overseer, Overconfident Orc, and Maiev Shadowsong, among some others. Now, these cards are perfect fits for Highlander because they provide overall value and are strong cards on their own and don't really require much synergy to work. This deck has a small dragon package with Malygos Aspect of Magic and Dragoncaster, but overall, this deck, I am expecting to see a lot of success. I think this is, out of all three Mage decks that I built, I think this deck is going to be the most successful. Before I wrap up, I want to give you guys a little sneak peek on what's to come for future content. Along with the deck showcase videos that I'll be making every day until the day before the expansion, I'll also be throwing in some extra content. Though that being the some gameplay with the new ranking system on April 1st, and some Demon Hunter gameplay on April 2nd, which I'm super excited to dive into. And that'll get my first impressions on playing Demon Hunter and actually trying out the Demon Hunter Initiate cards. I'm sure Demon Hunter will be super fun, the campaign that's coming out with him. I hope that's super fun too. And that'll all be extra content thrown into the deck showcase videos. So I'm super excited for a change in Hearthstone, and I'm super excited to play Ashes of Outland with all of you guys. And that's going to wrap up my showcase of these decks. If you have any suggestions or ideas, feel free to put them in the comment section below. I would love if this turned into a collaborative effort to build the best decks for the expansion. The deck codes for the decks I made are in the description, so feel free to use them in whatever way you want. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.